Welcome to Renewable Watch Podcast, your front row seat to what's really shaping India's renewable energy industry. I am Sarthik Takyar, the host of this episode. We break down the trends in the industry, why it matters, and where things might be headed. The stakes are high, the timeline is tight, and the questions are getting sharper. In this special episode, we will discuss the work done by the International Solar Alliance over the years, opportunities and challenges for member countries, and ISA's vision for the future. Joining us to answer these questions is our guest, Ashish Khanna, Director General, International Solar Alliance. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Khanna. Mr.
Thank you,
Khanna,
Sarthik.
this is a timely episode because the ISA General Assembly is about to happen. So if you can briefly talk about that and about ISA's achievement over the past year.
Thank you, Sarthak. First of all, a very greetings to all your viewers. It's wonderful to be on a podcast. Let me also share my thanks to all the supporters. It's my first assembly. First is always special. So big gratitude to all the listeners. As a lot of you know, International Solar Alliance was born about 10 years back as an idea in Paris. And what is wonderful is that an idea from a sapling has grown to a full tree. It has 124 countries as members. And to become a member, the country needs ratification from its parliament and signature from the head of this country. So you can imagine if 124 countries have become members with headquarters in India, it's a great moment of pride of one of the largest global South institutions. And if you see where the renewable energy and solar world is today, you understand the significance a bit more. Because it took 25 years for first 1,000 gigawatt of solar to be installed, and it took only 2 years to move it to 2,000 gigawatts. And as per our projections, as well as projections by other agencies, it's going to double to more than 4,000 gigawatts in less than 3-4 years. And more than 70% of all the additions that have come and are going to come is going to be from Asia Pacific. And 80% of all new additions of all new generation across the world is expected to be solar. So it's a very sweet spot and a very unique moment in history where it is expanding at such an exponential space, where Global South and Asia is at the center of it, and all of it is solar. That makes ISA and its assembly quite unique.
Thank you, Mr. Khanna. So as you said, ISA has member countries which are spread across continents. And it's a very diverse set of group. And each country will have its own solar potential, policy landscape, and they will be at different stages of development. So how does ISA tailor its approach for such a diverse membership? Because given some countries will be from developed countries and some countries are developing. So how do you balance priorities and how do you design policies and initiatives for such a diverse group?
Uh, Let me answer this great question in two parts. The first is that we do classify our countries into different blocks because different blocks have very different circumstances. Some of them are achievers who are doing very well on a larger macroeconomic and ecosystem of solar, whether it's to do with policies, regulations, but also the whole financial architecture of local currency financing, having the right institutional competitive bidding mechanisms and others. India and some of the developed countries like Australia, Europe, US, all of them fall in that. And then there are a lot of countries that are trying to get big. Some of the lower income countries fall in that bracket. And then there are specific buckets like small island developing states, SIDS. All of them have a very unique characteristics of more than 80% still fossil fuel based. Some of them are spending 7% of GDP. One of them is spending 13% of the GDP on diesel-based generation, which is just not right in an age of solar and batteries providing that solution at 1/3 the cost, if not even further less. So that's one whole group. We have a common solution. We have created a platform where 16 countries have come together to do a joint procurement, right from Caribbean to Pacific to in between Asia and Africa. Another set of countries are on Africa or low income or fragile. They have their unique characteristics where a lot of distributed renewable energy is even much more important. So we do have platforms that are tailored to a very unique set of countries, including on financing. Let me give you a small example. For the first time in 10 years, we are setting up a financing facility. We are not going to be a bank, but we are having a small risk mitigation and blended finance facility for Africa. That's called the Africa Solar Facility, about $200 million, out of which the first $74 million will be ready in a month's time, including contributions from ISA and Government of India, Sustainable Energy for All, Nigeria Sovereign Investment Authority, and World Bank. And all they are doing is to promote private sector to start investing in Africa distributed renewable energy. Because Africa will need a lot of distributed renewable energy, but still not enough solar investments are coming in Africa. So that helps mitigate the risk. So very customized to the needs of particular Africa, both technical assistance and financing.
Thank you. It's great that you talked about financing because I was coming to finance. The access to affordable finance remains one of the biggest barriers for solar deployment, especially in African countries. And you did talk about some initiatives that you've taken. Also, what about the global climate finance market? Because every year this becomes a debated theme at every COP, and we have another one coming up soon. The developing countries continue to point out that the developed countries have not met their financing commitments. So, do you believe that the global climate finance commitments are translating into real capital flows for solar in your member countries?
Yeah, look, this question has multiple levels. Let me say, without getting into the politics of COP, which I think is a separate domain, why are some countries able to attract a lot more investments and other countries are not able to attract? So, financing wise, $2 trillion were financed in all the countries. 75% of that is to mostly developed world, China and India, and not others. And there the answers are largely on policy and regulatory environment, both on the macro side, but also on the sector side and bankability of PPAs. So our work is to help our countries, A, come out with a very stable policy environment and regulatory environment in terms of laws and regulations, and then create a bankable PPA. Because I go around the world and say, if you're a stable country, is there any bankable PPA that is ready in a project, but that's not getting financed? Answer mostly is no. And therefore, the problem is on upstream work on making countries ready to attract private sector investment. But there is another element of finance, which again, going beyond the climate finance, is that why are long-term financing institutions like pension funds and sovereign wealth funds still not investing enough in renewable energy? Whether it is India, where the EPFO and LIC are still not big financiers for Indian renewable energy, or I was recently at the Africa Sovereign Wealth Funds, who have $1 trillion under them, out of which 80% is spent on US treasuries, and they were all coming together and thinking, why are we not investing our money for our own renewable energy? Two sovereign wealth funds of Middle East and pension funds of Japan and Canada, why they are not investing enough is a very important element for increasing this climate finance.
Mr. Khanna, you talked about your member countries. So when a country joins ISA and the team reviews the policy framework in that country, so what is a common policy problem that is prevalent in those countries, which hinders them to meet their solar potential or the solar targets? And what targeted policy advice or initiatives do you give them?
Yes, in fact, it's a good question. Um, Let me answer a slightly more broader point, which is behind your question. That why should any country become a member of ISA if you're not doing a lending because you're not a bank? And in this assembly, we have culminated our new vision and strategy. After talking to more than 100 countries, I personally met 50 ministers and more than 100 private sector CEOs and heads of multilateral institutions. And we are saying that let us have a complementary role to the multilateral banks like ADB, World Bank, where I worked, AFDB, and a lot more research institutions like IRENA and IEA. How? First of all, think about catalytic finance of small financial vehicles that are going to provide risk mitigation and blended finance to attract private sector investment. I gave you the example of Africa Solar Facility, which is being managed by a local Africa institution called Africa 50, which is co-owned by 34 governments. And we give policy and regulatory advice that I'll come in a bit, which is your question. The second part is low income countries are not able to attract investment because they don't have capability. They don't have the regulators and procurement specialists who are going to make bids and competitive tenders. As we sitting in India know how the ecosystem is now very vibrant. So we have set up 17 centers of excellence in 17 countries that we call Solar Technology Application Resource Centers, STARCs, that are now being connected through a hub in India on digitization. Because that is India's unique strength. And we being headquartered in India must cater to that strength that we are going to give all the digital advisory, digital twinning services to all our member countries. So that's a second pillar, which is quite unique. A third pillar is again, we were set up to create aggregation. Can we aggregate demand? We do it for SIDS. We do it for One Sun, One World, One Grid, which is on regional interconnections, bringing countries together. And in select countries, we do country partnership strategies. And final pillar is about thought leadership. Because we are based in India, we want to create thought leadership for Global South. That what do all the new technologies of green hydrogen, e-mobility, all of them mean for the developing? Now, on your specific question, while the context for policy and regulations is very different for different countries, most of them have a problem of A, not having clear targets, B, not having clear tariffs and tariff-based methodologies, because the payment security by private sector comes from clarity of tariffs. And third is really a regulatory framework that allows power purchase agreements to be formed. So if you have these three targets, tariffs, and a good bankable PPA, most countries do manage to be private sector.
We do talk to a lot of stakeholders from Africa, the private sector stakeholders, even some ministers as well, and they do look up to India for leadership in the solar sector, as you said. But uh, what can India also learn from these member countries while reviewing the policy framework in these countries? What does ISA, or what do you think that India can also adopt that some other countries are doing better?
That is a very good question. And all learning platforms have to be mutual. And one area where I specifically think there's a lot of mutual learning that needs to happen is on distributed renewable energy. For example, Nigeria has an extremely vibrant mini grids market where they are now planning to go from 500 mini grids to 10,000 mini grids, all done by private sector, no government intervention. And that is based on a results-based financing, which means only once the private sector has successfully done the project and given energy access, then the money is released. So I think that ecosystem is a lesson for all far-flung areas, whether you are in India and others. Similarly, the other area, which India is really trying in a big way, but there are lessons from others, is on solarization of agriculture. We do have PM Kusum, which is doing very well. Some people may argue that the subsidy element is slightly on the higher side because India has the budgetary provisions to provide a lot of subsidy to farmers. But a lot of other countries are looking at market-based mechanisms for solar-based pumps to actually become viable. And I think that's another area where India should think that can we actually create a market for solarization of agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Khanna. In fact, in the previous episode with Dr. Devajit Palit from Chintan Research Foundation, the topic was renewable mini grids, and we talked about how Africa can be a great market for Indian developers, and there's so much to learn from from the continent in this space. Mr. Khanna, you talked about agrivoltaics and renewable mini grids, and there's so many new technologies and kind of type of projects which are coming up, be it floating solar or solar storage hybrid projects. So, what do you see can be the role of such emerging technologies in member countries, ISM member countries?
So let me start by saying that because we are a treaty-based multilateral institution, we have a huge convening role. So what we are planning to do in this assembly is to use a convening role on 2 or 3 issues on which countries must come together. One of them is on harmonization of standards. So we are bringing IEC, which sets up the standards, some of the Indian experiences on what is the way forward for all countries to come at a common taxonomy of what are the solar PV, inverter, and battery standards that can be harmonized among developing countries. The second is on circularity. You know, in few years from now, there will be a huge demand for managing solar PV and battery waste. And some of the countries that are yet to start are asking us, how should we do the procurement so that we don't get into a problem 10 years for batteries or 25 years from solar PV. But there is no shared understanding of measurement and business models. So a convening authority, we are launching a community of practice in this assembly so that countries can come together, and just as meters and internet were based on some common protocols, we can have common protocols. So that I think is one big convening role. On new technologies that you said, we are actually releasing reports on green hydrogen, floating solar, and an ISA Academy for democratizing knowledge during this assembly, just to share the experience of how these business models are really working, and agriculture, agri-PV as well, which means 10 gigawatts of floating solar done in the world, another 70 is possible. How are countries going to be able to do it? Similarly, on green hydrogen, after the lot of initial euphoria, the market is seeing some corrections. What is the real trend among countries on options for green hydrogen? Similarly, on agri-PV and others. So these are a lot of reports and knowledge sharing that's going to happen in the assembly.
Thank you, Mr. Khanna. As you said earlier, that ISA also implements several training programs as well. So, what is the impact of such programs, and what can be done to promote more gender inclusivity in the solar sectors of ISA member countries?
So, as I mentioned, I personally believe, after having worked in more than 25 countries over the last 27 years, India has a unique ability to provide human capability to the developing world. So for that reason, setting up local capability centers that we call STAR-C, Solar Technology Application Resource Centers or Centers of Excellence, in local colleges, by connecting them to IIT Delhi, NPTIs of the world, or even INES of France, in sharing knowledge and best practices, is a very important way of building local capability. Because I think, and I'm a firm believer, development happens when you enhance the capability of countries to find their own answers rather than being told by someone else that this is your answer and do it. And therefore, a very unique ability of us being headquartered in India is to help them. And now, as I mentioned, connect them to digitization, because digitization and renewable energy are going to be intertwined in the next 5 to 10 years. So that is a very unique spot for us. On your question on gender, I feel both in terms of policies, but also in terms of our programs. We have a program called Solar for She, where we do some surveys in understanding how countries can deepen the gender engagement. But because solar, especially decentralized renewable energy, is so modular, it lends itself to a lot of localized gender based solutions, whether they are on self-help groups, whether they are for women empowerment, through solar home systems, through productive use appliances. Solar by itself is much more amenable to the very targeted use, especially where women-oriented businesses and women-oriented jobs are concerned.
We talked about IC, but what would be your advice to young professionals joining the solar sector?
Look, I would say, Sarthak, starting from my own journey, I didn't plan everything, including my coming back to ISA. So, first thing I say is follow your heart. I have taken decisions in my life based on what my heart said. I work from my mind, but I decide from the heart. Often it's the other way around, but it works for me because if you like what you are doing, you will excel. But if you want to go just in terms of what is better remuneration, you will be unhappy and you will not be successful in your jobs. Therefore, you must like and decide what you want to do based on your heart. And the other associated thing I would say, a skill that I really encourage, especially the Gen Z, is on resilience. Life is not about a very, superlative things. You most of the times you'll have to fall 5 times before you succeed. But if you give up and you're not going to be able to have resilience on trying again and again, especially in development arena, which is very difficult arena to make development impact, resilience is a very important skill. So follow your heart and be resilient.
Thank you for that advice, Mr. Khanna. Mr. Khanna, being the DJ of IC is a tough job, I'm sure. So, what is your management mantra and how do you make your life easy on a daily basis?
Uh, Look, I have seen this in World Bank as well when I was managing the entire Africa region and others. Obviously, this is a much wider global arena of all 124 countries. Two, three things that are always important is clarity of vision. If your team doesn't know what would success look like and they don't own it and they feel as if it's just DGs, you will never have a great team. So the first part is, does your team share your vision? And is it very clear? The second part, once there is vision clarity, a thing that I feel most leaders struggle with, including me, it's my journey, is how to delegate more effectively. The desire to be on top of all issues and knowledge has to be resisted, and you have to delegate much more once you know that your team understands what needs to be done. And third, be very efficient in meetings. I learned it from a lot of my mentors that everybody is expected to read the period materials, come, have a very focused discussion, decide and share the minutes within a day or two on who's going to do what by when, and then team takes care of it because everybody is looking forward to that clarity. And finally, be very flexible on personal times. Teams that do not value personal time and personal needs, especially in times of crisis and others, are never productive. So you work hard, but when there is a space needed for anybody, be extremely flexible. So those are the things that work for me, and have a hobby. I love music. I play tennis, so I make sure that I get time for my hobbies as
That's quite inspiring, Mr. Khanna. Mr. Khanna, probably at the end, we can talk about ISA's vision because it said that change is the only constant. So, how do you see ISA's vision evolving over the years?
So, as I mentioned, first of all, we are in a very sweet spot because more and more the world is going to look at global south for leadership in solar and renewable technology. And this is a sector which is going to continue to shine, not because of anything else, but for sheer economics. Solar with storage and transmission is the least cost generation solution for majority of countries. That is the main reason India has such a big target, not because of just climate change agenda, which I think is very good, but it makes sense on economics. So our main North Star is that solar, batteries, and all forms of storage and new technologies continue to shine the energy access, energy transition, and energy affordability in our countries. We are able through our platforms, because our role, as I mentioned, is an aggregator, as a convener, which means when we aggregate demand of countries, whether it's a SITS platform, whether it's an Africa solar facility, we are effectively able to leverage private sector. Third, we are actually able to improve capability in countries. I would like in 5-10 years from now, if any country's center of excellence is able to manage all of it by themselves and they don't need us, that is actually a success because we have managed to create an ecosystem in those countries for having a center of excellence. And finally, we must have the thought leadership where what is really important for global south and developing world becomes much more clearer on both research, development, local currency financing. I gave 2-3 examples. I would like ISA to create models for pension funds and sovereign wealth funds to invest 25-year programs as equity or debt, because that will bring down the cost rather than have short-term private equity or lenders in the sector. I would like a lot of new technology solutions for building integrated PV, because 70% of buildings in developing world by 2040 are yet to be constructed. It is not a developed world problem. Developing world, if it gets the BIPV model right, it takes care of land, it takes care of transmission, because when you create the building, what if you can actually get 50% of the needs just by building materials and the glass? So we would like to focus on thought leadership on solving the problems of global south. If you're able to do all of it, we don't have a choice.
Thank you, Mr. Khanna. On this note, we'll end the podcast. Thank you for sharing your insights and about ISA's initiatives in the past few years and its vision for the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to everyone. And for those young minds and the CEOs, please do follow the assembly. Please do join ISA because we are all members driven, all private sector stakeholders driven. We are here to make everyone move together so that no one is left behind. Thank you.